So here I have my center front and my side front and my other side front here. And we're going to look at sewing between the vertical notches, matching the bust notch. Now the reason why we notch the vertical seams is because we sew them first. And another reason why we notch in general is it saves on pinning time. So for you guys, you should be able to do this without pinning, but if you wanted to, you could pin if you felt like you had to. So to begin with, we have our right sides, and then we have them so they face each other, and then we line up our first notch. Now you can see that my fabric edges don't line up, but I'm not paying attention to that. All I'm paying attention to is that my notch is lined up. Because when you cut out your fabric, you may not cut it evenly, but if your notch is in the right spot, your seam allowance will be accurate. So what we do is we start up the top where the first notch is, and I'm just lining up my edge. So although it didn't quite line up here, I'm going to bring it back together. Then I've got my bust notch here, there, which if I've done my pattern making accurately, they should line up as well. So to begin with, I'm just sewing a little bit at a time, and then I'm readjusting. And I'm going to trust that my pattern making is accurate, so everything lines up. So I'm going to sew and keep an even distance from the presser foot to the edge of the fabric here, which should be about 1, but it might be slightly different depending on how you've cut your fabric out. Now once I get to that bust notch, I'm going to stop with my needle in, because you can see this fabric starting to not want to line up anymore. So once you get to this point, you lift your needle up, realign that first little bit, and sew. Once you get to where it's starting to not line up again, you leave your needle in, lift your presser foot up, realign the next section, and sew. So because we're sewing together two different curves, so the center front and the side front are different shapes, we need to sew a little bit at a time. Now I'm getting towards the end, so I can bring together my notches, and the rest it looks like I can line up. So I'm aiming to go to this point where my notches are. You can see there. And I finish with a little reverse stitch. So that is my seam finished. Now the next step would be to iron this open. But to make it sit better, make our seam sit better, we could cut out some little triangular notches. So any convex curve, you would cut a triangular notch out, and then any concave curve, this is ever so slightly concave, you could just clip. Okay, so on my convex curve, the curve that curves out, I've cut little triangular notches into it. And on my concave, so it slightly curves in, I've just cut little clips. So when you iron your seam out, so you open it up to iron it, that allows for the excess fabric to sit nicer when you open it up. And this one, because it's curved in, when you iron it open, these will sit slightly open, and it will allow for that curve to sit nice and flat across that seam. Now with the other side, if you wanted to pin, if you didn't feel comfortable with sewing without pinning, what I suggest you do is just pin your notches. You can see that I'm pinning perpendicular, so a right angle to the sewn edge. That way you can sew right up to your pin. Okay, you can see here that because you've got two different curves, they won't really want to sit flat together. But if you sew like I showed you, so you just line up a little bit at a time, sew that, stop, readjust, line it up. That is how you will get a nice seam.